So I know you've spent a fair amount of time playing around with Kafka and actually delivering real life projects with it. Could you elaborate on why it's useful, what problems it helped you solve, and how it was to work with?
Yeah, so our team was using it to transfer data between basically our main database. When we would make changes in there, we would trigger some process that would eventually drop a message into Kafka, and then eventually get it over to a different service that would take that message, process it, transform it from a database level change to like a API level change. So what our goal was is that an individual database change would happen here, but we wanted to tell the users that this API resource had changed. And we then, once we made this transformation, we could fire off the webhooks or WebSocket notifications to allow that notification to go out. The biggest reasons that we switched to using Kafka, one is previously that was done via like an HTTP post across between these two services, which was fine. But if the second service went down, we were potentially losing data. And Kafka gives you that buffer so that if either side really goes down, you don't necessarily lose any data.
It's a very fault tolerant, also very
it's
quick.
extremely fault tolerant. It's very fast and very high throughput as well. And that was the other factor. Like, we were talking about, ProCard as a whole, we're a decently large company. We have a lot of changes going through. If we were to do this using something like RabbitMQ or SQS, it would require a lot of resources. With SQS, it would become very expensive very fast. SQS is great and it's overall cheap, but when you start getting to a certain point, it actually becomes really expensive compared to something like Kinesis or Kafka.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about that a little bit too. In a world where we're now coordinating and orchestrating all these different services on Azure or AWS, obviously it's cost, but that exact example where costs became prohibitively expensive and you decided to roll your own solution, how often, I know you're in the higher level of planning out projects now, do you consider rolling your own versus forget it, Amazon's got it solved, Azure's got a solution for it, let's just roll with it?
I very much prefer to try to let Amazon run with it. Even with we went to Kafka, you're not the person making the decisions, and I don't really want to share too many internal details, but personally, my personal approach would be I'd turn to manage Kafka over trying to stand on my own cluster. Same with things like Elasticsearch and Redis. Redis, I've even been with teams that have run it before. It's not terribly hard to run at scale. The worst becomes when you're trying to run it in a Sentry mode and you have to manage the cluster. But it's still even easier to just use the managed services that Amazon provides. And it's an area of Amazon I feel like doesn't get as much attention. Like they're managed versions of these existing services as opposed to their own internal hand-rolled things like SQS. I think they're really valuable solutions that still give you that benefit. Yes, you pay for an AWS, but the thing you're paying for is to try to offset your own operations cost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you still get that same benefit if you're turning to something like Amazon MQ, which is basically just managed RabbitMQ or Amazon's managed Kafka services.
Yep. Yeah, and I was given a little bit of a tour through AWS Amplify the other day, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, but gives you a really, really quick, streamlined way to get a brand new application. Could be like a greenfield project, the front end set up, the back end set up, the schema for the database, all in a GUI if you want to. There's also a CLI for it. Actually, Brian Johnson, the first guest on this show, was the one who was spieling me through it. And it was remarkable how quickly you could get a new project up and running, and more importantly, hosted with staging infrastructure, prod infrastructure. That was probably the biggest value add for me, because obviously you could have a script that you run locally that spins up a React front end with a Nest backend, and you could have, a CLI that also allows you to set up the schema. But it was genuinely impressive how quickly he was able to have all of that with operating infrastructure running with very minimal costs until you reached a threshold of, I think it was like 1 million requests per month, something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
So the setup with the hosted infrastructure was really the cool part about Amplify.
Yeah, no,
anyway,
I definitely agree. I think things like that, and even the Elastic Beanstalk they have, like, they're really great ways to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And then these other services are ways to kind of move on from that, and you need to. I definitely, like, to the point of the original question, I try very hard to avoid rolling my own when I can because I've got enough other things to take care of. If I can trust somebody else to manage that and it fits within the cost budgets for what I'm told I can do as a team or what I personally want to do for my own personal projects,
Mhm.
I'm happy to. I'd rather offset that cost that way.
And like we're talking about earlier, there is that point that you hit where you have to decide, should I go down this hole of spending the time to do this? Is it worth it? What's the opportunity cost on it? And oftentimes Amazon's right there in your back pocket, taking your wallet, saying, we'll take care of it for you.